All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cinema Lab. My name is Sarah Naraki. I am the director of Wealthy Theater, the founder of Cinema Lab, and your host for tonight's chat. Joining me today are two of my favorite people, Caleb Dillon. What's up, sir?
Hi.
Hello.
What's up?
And Virginia Ansengruber tuning in from Florida. How you doing, girl?
I'm here at the tortoise capital of the world. Happy to say I love you both.
It's no longer the Sunshine State, right? It's the
No.
tortoise capital of the world. All right. Well, hopefully everyone who's tuning in right now is aware that we are going to be talking about the 2019 award-winning film Parasite, which was directed by Bong Joon-Ho. For those of you who maybe are catching this for the first time and have not attended Cinema Lab or Screen Club, this is a book club style event, but for movies and TV shows. So if you haven't seen Parasite yet, I would strongly recommend that you stop this broadcast right now and go watch it, because this is a movie that you really, really, really don't want to be or don't want to have spoiled. This is a very good movie to go into blind, too. So we are going to be spoiling a lot of the movie. So this is your official spoiler alert to shut this off. Go watch the movie. And then if you want to watch this later, this will be archived on the Wealthy Theater YouTube page. But also, Caleb is our new podcast editor. So there's a Wealthy Theater podcast. Caleb, can you tell us where people can find that podcast?
Where can't people find that podcast?
That's the question.
I honestly am wondering because, everybody uses Spotify, right?
Yeah.
Our Lord Spotify. It's on Spotify. That's the easiest way to go. Apple Podcasts, other places. I don't know. If you're listening and there's a place that you listen to podcasts and it's not there, tell us about it and we'll get it there.
Cool. So are people just searching for Wealthy Theater? Is that correct for the title?
That would be a logical thing to do, yes.
I found it by searching that very phrase, but it's theater with an R-E, you guys.
That's right. We are old school theater, so I will put it up here too. So in case you can't find it, you can find us on Facebook, which might even be where you're watching this from. So check out the wonderful vintage spelling going on down there, and check out this podcast after you've watched the movie. So I guess the first place to dive in with this, speaking of kind of going into this blind, what did you guys think of the movie, and did you know anything about it going into it? Virginia, let's start with you.
One, I don't have adequate words for how much I loved it. And two, I actually did go into it kind of blind. Even knowing that it won the Academy Award for Best Picture, I kind of intentionally didn't spoil it for myself, which is not usual for me. I for the most part, do not believe in spoilers. Shout out to my friend Kate from This Podcast is Haunted for that mantra. Spoilers do not exist because we have the internet. But I kind of just went into it being like, all right, let me just like sit down and get my, I don't eat popcorn, but my metaphorical popcorn. Last night it was ice cream. And I just kind of sat down and went. And being a fan of Bong Joon-Ho from before, I had actually in 2009 seen a film called Tokyo, which was a film that was 3 short films.
I love that one.
Together. It's so good. And when I was in college, I worked in our on-campus movie theater. A second shout out already, I'm 2 minutes in, to the Student Life Cinema at Florida State University. We programmed that. We're a student-run program, and we voted to have that come in. And for those who haven't seen it, it's 3 short films. It's Bong Joon-Ho. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of his name, but it's like Leos Carax? I don't know. He's French. And then Michel Gondry. And they all have short films that are all shot in Tokyo. None of them are Japanese filmmakers. So it also was kind of an interpretation of non-Japanese artists' take on the city. And Bong Joon-Ho has this incredible short about someone with agoraphobia. And so I was excited to see how he would use proximity and location in this film, because I think that was a really interesting additional character in that short film. obviously also we know him from Snowpiercer and Okja, which is on Netflix as well. So I was just really, really excited because I knew going into it that probably the descriptor of black comedy was probably like a little bit of a misnomer, right? Um, but yeah, oh, I'm still thinking about it. I just watched it for the first time last night, I'll be honest. So I like woke up thinking about it. Um, and I'm really excited about this conversation, especially as it relates to a theme that we circle back to a lot in this series, both Cinema Lab and Screen Club, which is this idea of self-perception and kind of how it motivates the way that we move in the world. So I'm really excited and overwhelmed with emotions because it's a lot to take in.
So you only saw it this one time?
Yeah. And I'm literally like, that's part of why I'm like, okay, I need to talk to other people about it because I'm sure that they're, and also there's planned rewatches in the future too. But yeah, I don't think it's a film that you cannot have a conversation about afterward, right? It's not one of those that just, sits and you can just be like, all right, cool, that was cool. You have to kind of digest it because it is so full. And especially as it relates to a culture, to be honest, that I don't really know a lot about in terms of social dynamic, right? Like, so that was also interesting to me to kind of explore that as well as a viewer.
Awesome. I think this is going to be a great conversation because you were right. This is definitely a movie that you can't watch and not talk about, or even if you don't have anyone to talk to, I guess, like really think through it. I think I saw it like at least 3 times in theaters, if not more, and have seen it outside of that too. It's so, so good. And I did another podcast episode about this too, but that was a while ago, so I'm excited to dive back in. Caleb, what about you? Did you know anything about it going into it, and what was your first impression?
No, and listening to a lot of podcasts about it in the last few days, just kind of reviewing people's thoughts at the time, both pre and post Oscars. I think that's the general consensus for people who saw it before the Oscars, where they'd heard about a bunch of hype about it. They knew that people were really freaking out about it, but I think they did a really good job of not letting you know what it was exactly. I purposely didn't watch a trailer or anything like that, but I really didn't know what it was. I had heard that it was just incredible, and I'd heard that it sort of shifts to... I kind of expected it to be more of a horror film going into it, and I think a lot of people hear the word Parasite, and it's kind of a scary looking poster, so it looks like a horror film. I also had not seen any of Bong Joon-Ho's previous films. I hadn't even seen Snowpiercer, and I'd heard a lot of sort of mixed reviews on that one from people that I know. So
Chris Evans haters. Sorry.
Well, yeah. I didn't have any expectations is the point. And actually, Sarah, it was your fault that I actually pushed myself to go see it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And, I mean, for everyone who's seen it, hopefully, it just washes over you in such a way where when you don't know what genre it's supposed to be or you don't know where it's headed, it's such a ride, and it's so breathtaking. And everything about the cinematography and the music and the performances is just jaw-dropping. It's such a, especially for me not having seen any of his previous work, it's such an artist arriving in complete control of his craft. I mean, I know that he had been making films for 20 years before that, and now that I've seen some more of his earlier work, there's some that I really love, there's some that I was pretty iffy on, but I feel like when I was rewatching it a couple nights ago, it reminded me of when I first saw the first couple of Wes Anderson films, honestly, where it was just, I was just smiling the whole time. My breath was taken away the whole time. I couldn't believe how perfect everything I was seeing was, but just the getting swept up in just the pure artistry of it.
Yeah, I was so blown away by this movie when I first saw it. And just like what Caleb said, I too didn't watch any trailers. I'd heard that there was some, Oscar buzz around it and that kind of thing, and it was coming to the UICA. And this, or one of these iterations of the poster, is all I saw. There was a giant cardboard standee in the UICA basement, like when you get to the bottom of the stairs. And it was just this, and this is all that I had seen as promotional material for it. So, I mean, after seeing it, you can really dissect this, but it takes a bit to look at this and, try to figure out what the movie is going to be about. You assume with the feet on the ground that maybe there's a death or something like that. The censor bars, what's that about? We're going to, dissect that later. But that's all I'd seen, and so it really piqued my interest. And then, oh man, I was on the edge of my seat for the entire movie, and there's not a lot of movies that do that, where you were just absolutely sucked in. And even if you're not watching it in a theater, watching it in a distractive environment, I think you'd still get really sucked into this. So as we dive into this conversation, I just want to note too that, again, this is a book club style discussion. So even though the three of us could go on for hours and hours, we really do want you guys to chime in too. So if there's anything we're talking about that you agree with or disagree with, or any questions you have or theories or anything like that, just comment below and it'll pop up, and we're going to try to get to everybody's questions and comments. So please join in. So the, I guess, kind of question popped up in this first question of trying to categorize it. What genre is it? So why don't we start with that of how would you categorize this film? I would say I don't think it's one genre, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Caleb, I'll throw it back to you.
No, it's really uncategorizable. And there's a lot of films that I was trying to pair this with that play around with genre. But especially rewatching it, it's a film of two completely different halves. Mm-hmm. The first hour of the film is just nonstop comedy. It's this comedy of manners. It's this comedy of this family, and it's sort of a crime, like low-level crime comedy. It could almost be sort of like a bumbling collection of like Coen brothers characters, who I know that Bong is really influenced by. But once it takes that turn an hour in, it's not that there isn't humor after that, but it completely shifts its tone. And then by the end of it, it ends on such a note that you can't even believe that you started in this one place and you got to this other place. And I really was trying to think of other films that I could compare it to that take such a complete just 90-degree turn, and I came up with nothing. I not to this drastic degree, and where both halves of the film are equally enjoyable as well. It's not like, oh, the comedy's gone, now it's kind of a slog to get to the end. It's just as breathtaking.
Yeah, that's tricky. Nothing's coming to mind for me. Certainly there are some movies that feel like they could be split into, 2 or 3 different stories. Like I'm thinking Psycho is one that could definitely be 2 different parts, or The Place Beyond the Pines. I think that could easily be 3 different movies. I think it's 3, maybe 4 storylines, I forget. But to your point of tonally shifting and doing this 180, I can't think of anything. If anyone watching can think of a movie that's similar, let us know. But Virginia, can you?
I weirdly was just thinking of that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, but not because it really reminds me of this, but only because it kind of plays with those 2 spaces of fast-paced comedy, physical comedy. The characters are so absurd that you kind of get lost in it, and then it obviously has a little bit of more of a turn as things get darker for those characters, especially with substance abuse and stuff. But yeah, it's incredibly singular, and I think that it kind of just speaks to this thing that we talk about a lot, right, with Screen Club and Cinema Lab, which is this idea that, you know, there is very rarely something new. There's almost always an intentionality of remaking things or pulling from something as an homage. And I think the fun thing about this is what you guys both said, is like the entire time I was watching it, I was just like glued, you know. That was an actual recreation of my eyes, you know. For the podcast listeners, they were cartoon style out of my head. And I kind of even changed locations when I was watching it. I started watching it on my TV, and then I was like, oh, I'm old, my back hurts, let me get in the bath. So then I had it like on my phone. And even on my phone, you know, with subtitles and things like that, there was still such an engrossing feeling, which I think, just because I've mentioned subtitles and I actually quoted Bong Joon-Ho in our last Screen Club, he famously said in his Oscar acceptance speech, you know, if you can, I think it was for the Academy Awards anyway, this movie won a lot of awards, but he said, you know, if you can get past a 1-inch barrier of subtitles, your world is going to open up so drastically in terms of art. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but for anybody watching, you know, that might be nervous to take on foreign films because of that, because of this idea of like, I can't read and watch at the same time. You can, you really can, because the way that your brain starts to work after you've watched a couple scenes is it starts to integrate that with the pictures that you're seeing. So you kind of automatically, your eye goes to catch the words quickly, and then you go back up and you're watching the scene, and you go, you know. So if you can kind of get past a place of feeling like that will hinder your enjoyment of something, and know that your brain scientifically and chemically, I'm clearly a neurobiologist, it will do the work for you, is what I'm saying. And so please take that leap, because, you know, this is such a perfect example of it. And if this is the first film that you watch to kind of be that foray into foreign films, what a great choice, because again, it's incredibly singular, and I almost want to classify it as like a suspense film, you know, like, we don't use that word suspense movie, and I like thinking back to like my Blockbuster days, going to like the little sections, it would be like suspense / thriller, and it was like you know, Cruel Intentions would be there or something like that, you know, or like True Lies. None of these movies, by the way, are what like Parasite is, but I like the idea that, well, actually, you know what, True Lies was kind of actiony and very funny. But there's something about this that the entire time you're watching it, you're holding your breath, because you know something's coming. You just don't know what it's going to be. And it unfolds in the first few acts as a comedy, as a dark comedy, as you know, now we're getting into spoiler territory, but as a story of this family that kind of is living in poverty, and their ability to kind of act their way out of it. We find out right away that both of the parents are unemployed, and the son and daughter, I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names because I will butcher them, but the son and the daughter, you know, are trying to help out their parents. They live in this like sub-basement kind of apartment, and really quickly, you know, the son gets offered to take over a tutoring job, and then he gets his sister the job as the art tutor, and she kind of acts her way into it. And we learn really quickly, you know, I just Googled some stuff about art therapy and then kind of BS my way through it, you know, and then the driver, all of a sudden, you know, she kind of frames the driver, and they need a new driver. So now the dad has a job, and then the housekeeper has a peach allergy. So they get rid of her by, you know, framing her for having TB. What a wild, and like the scene where they cut back to them practicing the script in the apartment. And it's like, do people even get TB anymore? And it cuts back to the madam in the car being like, do people even get TB anymore? It was such perfect pacing.
So good.
You know, and so we kind of have that setup, right? But that setup is long. It's longer than we would traditionally think. It is, to Kayla's point, like the first half of the film. So you kind of, at this point, are rooting for this family, because you don't, at least for me, I didn't find them malicious. You know, they weren't trying to harm anyone. They were trying to have work. They were trying to feed themselves. They were trying to eventually maybe get to where they weren't living in this like kind of terrible apartment. And so it felt like you wanted to be on their side, right? When she's photoshopping the college degree so that he can look like he's like a college student tutor or whatever, you know, you feel that. And I don't know about you guys, but like growing up kind of lower middle class, there's elements of like my life now as like a 31-year-old who works in like the financial services industry, where like the amount of money that we're talking about on a daily basis as not just like budget, but also like wealth acquisition that other people have is still astonishing to me. Like the fact that I have healthcare right now as someone who kind of started my career in like freelance filmmaking is like incredible. So I think automatically, if you're someone who did not grow up incredibly financially privileged, you're going to understand this family. You're going to want to root for them because the things that they want they don't feel exorbitant. They don't feel exploitative. They feel very tangible. You know, the son eventually does actually want to go to college. You know, that was one of my favorite lines in the whole film was when he was, you know, he stopped before he left for the interview for the tutoring job, and he looked at his dad and he said, you know, Dad, I don't think of this as a crime or, you know, conning somebody because I really am going to go to college. I'm not, just think of me as getting the paper a little bit early, you know? And so there was such a relatability to that really makes you root for them and in all of their like scheming and lying and razoring off the little fuzzes of the peach fruit so that she has like a massive asthma attack. You root for them because you want them all to kind of be happy. And then it turns, and then you're kind of like, oh, what hath we wrought, you know? And so I like that as a viewer. You know, we just talked about Twilight Zone and how it kind of presented things and let you kind of decide how you would process those things. It wouldn't spoon feed you a yes or no, or this is right or wrong. It kind of lived in that gray area. And I think that there's so much of this film that kind of does that as well. That is really challenging to watch and process, but really fun because you don't get that a lot anymore, right? Like we almost are always given like this black and white, this is what's happening. And I like that this wasn't that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I thought of one. I spent all morning trying to think of a movie that takes such a complete turn, and I couldn't think of anything. And then, of course, I just thought of a very obvious one of my favorite films of all time, that every time you put it on, it's so rewatchable, it's so fun, it's so exciting. And then when things turn sour, it gets so bad for everyone, and by the end of it, it's such a tragic tale. And it's
Garfield, A Tale of Two Kids.
It's Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights, yes. Yeah.
I was going to say Paddington too. So
Come on, you guys. We're trying to talk about serious cinema here.
We're trying to complete each other's sandwiches,
Paddington
right?
has Hugh Grant in it. So if there's a more serious actor out there than Hugh Grant.
Doesn't it also have the guy that's the dad in Downton Abbey? Isn't he Paddington?
No, it's Ben Whishaw who plays Q in 007.
I thought a Downton Abbey person was in it, but whatever. I'll put it on my list.
I don't know why I know that, by the way, but I know that.
What a twist. This Parasite podcast
is actually about terrible movies.
Also, the fact that you knew the entire title of Garfield 2, A Tale of Two Kitties, is very impressive.
No, it's not. It's depressing is what it is. Hey, you guys, we have our first question. Are you ready for it? I'm excited. I think
yes.
This is going to set us up for some other stuff. All right, from our favorite viewer, Mary. It's Caleb's mom. Hi, Caleb's mom. So what do we think of the title, and what does it mean, or what is it a reference to? Caleb, do you want to take this since your mom's asking?
I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than the first scene of the film when the Kim father is flicking away the stink bug, and then later on he becomes literally the stink bug for the Park family. And obviously just the themes of a pest coming into your home or infiltrating your life and slowly taking it over, or you being unable to get rid of them, and for as much as one family is taking from the other family is taking from that family because they can't exist without them. They're so unable to do the simplest day-to-day tasks. They just don't have the experience with it. So if you're asking who's the parasite in the movie, I think everyone is a parasite of someone else in the film.
Definitely. Yeah, everybody is parasitizing the other. And I think it would be easy to just see it as the Kim family parasitizing the Parks because they're wealthy. And then I forget the last name or the family name of the family that the previous housekeeper, whose husband is in the basement. I forget their name, but they too are parasitizing the Parks. So you would think that's where it stops, but really the Park family is also parasitizing their, servants, anyone that works for them, as they can't function without somebody to drive them, to cook for them, to take care of their kids, whatever it is. So yes, everyone is a parasite to the other person around them. Virginia, any other thoughts you want to add to that with the title and its meaning?
I think you guys, hit it on the nail. I think the idea of human nature as being, parasitical, is that the right word? I don't know. We have such a need as humans for other people, right? Another Twilight Zone theme coming back to us. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because if I have to really pick one of the families, it's actually going to be the Park family. I think is more, only for the scene later when they're, after the Kim's family's home has flooded and they're in the gym and the Park daughter texts to be like, Kevin, come over, we're having a party. And, they basically all had to drop everything to come to this party. And then there was the scene where the Mr. Park was talking to Mr. Kim and he was like, you're being paid extra. So that really hit home for me because there's this idea that for those of us in the service industry, I'm speaking as a former, and who knows, maybe future waitress, you never know. But I've worked in coffee, I've worked in, food service, worked at movie theaters. Like there's an expectation, I think, a lot of times of I'm paying you so da 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 da. And as we see with Mr. Park's job, after a certain point, when you hit a certain echelon of where you are in your career or money that you're making, those expectations actually go down. Like most CEOs don't do the grunt work. They're at such a high level overseeing things that, and no disrespect to CEOs in the world, y'all are running it, I'm sure, but like those day-to-day tasks, I'm sure you're working smarter, not harder. Your cumulative experience has allowed you to now be in a place where you're not in those day-to-day trenches. And so I think there was something that was really poignant about that scene where Kevin is like in a cot, in a gym, his house just flooded, and he's basically beholden to this girl who for all intents and purposes is his girlfriend, but he's also her tutor. And so then he has to kind of like get it together and go to this birthday party while he's dealing with this kind of immense trauma of like losing his house and everything, So if I had to pick one family, I would say the Parks more than the Kims. But to Caleb's point and to your point, I think it's both. I think it's human nature.
Yeah, I think that's good. And that brings up a point of trying to narrow down the protagonist and antagonist that we're going to get into a little bit later. But first, a very important question from our friend Chris Kotcher. What other skill sets would you recommend to infiltrate a wealthy family's home? I'm going to say a good wig, a good disguise, right? Maybe that'll help. I don't know. A fake mustache, perhaps. Any other tips for Chris?
I mean, Yeah, I mean, the ability to act. For example, I am a terrible actor because I'm a terrible liar. I'm not good at thinking quickly on my feet, so I would be the least skilled person at doing anything that the Kim family did, or infiltrating anyone's home. And I think that there's a certain kind of mind that can think two steps ahead and have that like excuse ready, or the way that the Kim family is able to turn the Park family basically to, think that they need to rely on them, just at a moment's notice. When the daughter comes in as the art therapy teacher, and the mother says, well, I want to sit in on your first lesson, and she just says, no, you're not sitting in. I don't do that. Knowing that if she does sit in, it's not going to work. The whole thing is going to fall apart. She's got to have time with the kid, probably to tell the kid, hey, look, here's what's going on. I'm scamming your family. I'll give you all the candy you want if you just, X, Y, and Z. But the fact that she was able to see the mother, see what she needed to do to shut down that situation immediately, that's a skill that some people have and some people do not have.
I think you're right, though, with acting for sure. So Chris already has a leg up on all of us because he's a great actor. So watch out, wealthy people. He might come parasitize you. But yeah, gaslighting and manipulation is such a big theme in this movie, from the various people who are, again, parasitizing others. So yeah, if you're good at manipulating and wearing a wig and acting, then I suppose you could pull off what the Kim family did. Okay, I want to get into some visual stuff with the movie. I'm going to pull up a slide here. So to kind of set the stage, earlier we're talking about, what was it? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. The sequence, when they were prepping for taking over the housekeeper, that position, and rehearsing the script and stuff. And Virginia, I think you had said something about that scene went on, not in a negative way, but went on kind of long, a lot of exposition, but it was all very well paced, and I would not cut any of it out because it adds to the energy and the character development and all of that. But that's one thing that I feel like this film does a really great job of developing the characters and the family. And you might on paper think, oh, we're spending a lot of time trying to get the message across of who these people are. But when you see the movie, there's nothing to cut out of it. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know if other people think it should have been trimmed down, but I thought it was fantastic. But right off the get-go, I mean, this is our opening shot. So as you can kind of see, I know the picture's a little bit blurry, but you can see that the apartment, the windows are at street level. So you are beneath the earth, where they're starting out. You have laundry hanging in the window. The windows are kind of dirty. It looks dingy. It's pretty dark down there. Just a little bit of natural light coming in. So, I mean, what is that telling us about them just from that shot before we're introduced to any characters? What was your takeaway when you saw this?
I mean, it tells you everything you need to know right away. I think that's one thing that Bong Joon-Ho does really well in all of his films. He kind of just starts the film. He kind of just goes, okay, now the story is starting. I'm not going to give you a bunch of exposition. I'm not going to set anything up. He's so masterful at just visually showing you, here's who these people are, here's how they live and why they live that way. And, just keep up as we go along. I'm not going to stop the story or add in a bunch of extra padding just so that you're totally comfortable knowing everything. Which I think is why, to your point, this film especially just feels like every single line and every single shot matters, and there's nothing extra in the whole film.
Right. I think everything is, it feels very high concept. There's a lot of subtext to every shot or every line, which is just so brilliant. I mean, even if we look at the next shot of Mr. Kim looking outside, he's behind bars. Again, we're seeing that he is kind of underground trying to look out. So you start to get a sense that he is caged, like an animal trapped, needs to like get up and out of there. And then, of course, you have the drunk guy in the alley that's peeing right outside of your house. So you get the understanding of just how gross of an environment it is and how sick of it they are and how desperate they are to get out too. But I wanted to jump to this shot. And right in the first scene, we're introduced to the characters trying to, hop onto the neighbor's Wi-Fi. And it doesn't really seem like a big thing because I'm sure at some point we've all tried to hop onto somebody's Wi-Fi, maybe when we didn't have permission, So that doesn't seem like such a terrible thing to do, but it's like one thing after another of them just leeching on to other people and, trying to work their way up. Virginia, any thoughts from you on the intro of the characters and how it was developed?
Yeah, I think, and I'm so glad you took a still of this one because I don't know about you guys, and I know that what I'm about to say is going to be a wholly American-centric point of view, so I apologize in advance. But I think a lot of times when I go to immerse myself in a foreign film, I'm almost always expecting it to be in a different time period. I'm almost always expecting there to be some sort of, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like ancient or something, but like even that, right? Like that was probably a lot more modern than I think it was, but in my mind, I'm thinking this dynastic sort of, very old historical context. And I appreciated that like right away, my American-centric viewpoint was kind of thrown out the window, being like, girl, of course everybody has cell phone. You know what I mean? Like everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has the internet, and it's, again, I'm very aware that what I said comes off as incredibly racist. So I apologize to everyone, but I think that that's where my brain automatically goes sometimes, is just because of oftentimes the foreign films that we are exposed to in America. It's easier to kind of remove yourself and separate yourself in that way and think that, even if this was in the 80s or something, right, they would have had a landline and not cell phones. But I loved how immediately I was present into this time period, 2018, 2019, in just a different part of the world. And it's people that are trying to get Wi-Fi from the new coffee shop. Oh, there's a new coffee shop in town. That's cool. Like that to me was really a lesson in how centric my brain is to whiteness. But also I appreciated that it wasn't trying to tell a story that happened way back when as some sort of, cautionary tale or morality tale or something like that. It was like, here's a present story of present day people. And maybe I'm completely alone in this. So if you guys have never felt that, I apologize for going on like a tangent, but I appreciated that it was immediately I was thrown into a world that I understood contemporary contextualized in a contemporary setting. Like that made me feel like I've been that person. I understand that. Like how many times are we hoping that the neighbor has like Wi-Fi that isn't password protected, so that when you move and there's like that week that you don't have internet, you can kind of still like watch your Netflix or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think that relatability in a contemporary contextualization was really cool. If anybody listening to this doesn't feel that, I apologize, but like
it's a fun juxtaposition because the conditions that they're living in are almost medieval in in their basicality, but then they're talking about Wi-Fi service, and it's like,
and the pizza
brain
place
has to do a quick flip where it's like, oh, this is now.
Yeah, like literally they're making boxes for like a pizza delivery place. And I'm like, I eat pizza. You know what I mean? Like there's a moment where you're like, I've seen that, and again, fully admitting how white centric my brain can be just because of where I live and the conditioning of the art that I have exposed myself to, taking full admission and responsibility for that. But in that, like you said, that sort of head turn to be like, oh, they're not, I don't know, doing the things that we might have seen in a foreign film taking place in the same country in a different time period. And that was really interesting to me. But also to that end, some of the jokes about present day Korean lifestyle and diplomacy and relations, specifically as we get into the second half of the film, was really interesting too, to see our former housekeeper character kind of joking about a North Korean, dictator. You're kind of like, oh, all right, okay. They're just making jokes the way that we would like, and not getting into any realm, but do you know what I mean? Like they were fully present in their time and space, and the people that they were talking about were people that we know because they're current leaders, and it was just really interesting.
Well, and a point that you made earlier too, in regards to the Wi-Fi of, I've been there. I lived that. I've moved into a new apartment and hoped that there was even a business nearby that didn't have password protected Wi-Fi that I could hop on, because that's going to save me like $100 a month or something. And even the pizza job, even though they're assembling boxes, and maybe that's not so much a job that would be around here, because I think that the local health department would not be fond of the work environment. But still, I mean, you think of any kind of side hustle, whether it's like freelance stuff or picking up a part-time gig or, doing ship shopping, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just very real that a lot of people have to do that. So all of these things, not only are we establishing their location and the dire situation and how desperate they are to get out, but this is building this case for empathy for them and sympathy, and just like wanting to side with them when they start doing these bad leech-like things, that it's inevitable that we're feeling really bad for them. Like, oh, but come on. I mean, did you see the guy pissing outside of their house? Like, come on, they need a better life. Who really wants to be folding boxes like that? Like, you want to have a more refined job. Come on. Or you can afford that Wi-Fi. So you're slowly building this case that when it pivots, it's kind of like it's gaslighting us as the viewers of like, well, but, and justifying what they're doing.
Well,
but
I was
really,
just going to say, like, to that point, do they do bad things until they do bad things? Like, yes, lying your way into a job is not like the most ethical thing in the world, but did he not adequately tutor her, right? Like, does she not kind of provide some therapy for the kid in his art? Did she pull actual factual things about art therapy from her Googling into her brain and then regurgitate them to a mom who didn't know better? Yeah. So
right.
like, in a way, is he not driving Mr. Park, right? It's hard for me because it's like, and this is what's great about the film, right? Is the tone, the cloud above all of their behavior is dishonest. But then the work that they find, the work that they do for this family is genuinely honest. They are cooking, they are cleaning. She does make Ramadan. Do you know what I mean? Like there is an element of like, I don't know, like I'm lucky enough to have been able to pursue like a college degree, right? Like I have my bachelor's and I'm now in a position where like I'm starting to study to get my MBA because I have a job that is going to provide tuition reimbursement. I am so fortunate in that, right? Have I thought about lying about having a master's degree so that I could get a better job? Absolutely. I haven't done it, but I also know that there's been times in the past where I've told my friends, yo, if they're not asking for like transcripts to say you have a BA, look, I've done it. I'm not going to lie, you know? So there's a part of it that's like, it's not because I'm trying to get my friend to scam anything. It's because I know that there are oftentimes socioeconomic barriers that exist and create division and inability for people to escape a certain level of economy that they live in. So there have been times in my past where I've just been like, yo, if they're not asking for your transcripts, just like say you have a bachelor's, because they're not going to check. Because most of the time, people don't check. So if that is something that allows you to get in at least to consideration for a job that could help you better yourself, to help you eventually get your bachelor's degree like Kevin wants to do, right? There's an element of all of their behavior that, and maybe I'm fully like in it, maybe I'm Stockholm syndrome in it with them right now, but there's a part of me that feels like truly until they started doing bad things, I don't know if they've been doing bad things, you guys, because there was a truth to the service that they provide.
It just shows how masterful Bong Joon-Ho is at towing that line of who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist. Is there a clear one or the other? And it's also perfectly tied up at the end of the film when the son wakes up in the hospital bed and he starts laughing because he is in his voiceover. He says the doctor didn't look anything like a doctor and the lawyer didn't look anything like a lawyer. And I think that those lines are a key to the whole rest of the film too, where is everybody faking it a little bit? Is everybody on the inside just thinking, am I getting away with this? Like, should I be...
But isn't that life? I mean,
yeah,
that's what I mean.
Most people fake it till you make it. But Virginia, to your point of like, yeah, but okay, so, he fibbed a little bit here, but still kind of helped. Or, they lied about this, but then he still drove him around, whatever. But the like moral, ethical question is, where do you draw the line? And I think the bigger thing here is, well, yes. But the other thing is this not a prime example of grooming? That they're grooming the audience to believe like, well, this is okay, so let's go up here. Yeah, oh, okay, you're still lying, but you're doing a good thing. Okay, I'm going to bring it up a little bit more. Okay, this is really pushing the line, but okay, I'll go with it because so far you've proven yourself, until you get to that breaking point. And if you notice that my hand was doing this motion, the theme of stairs is ever present in this film. Don't you just love that? I have so many stair theories about this movie.
Well, and before we get to the stairs, just based on what you're saying, I mean, let's not forget that the tutoring is one thing, the art therapy is a second step, but those didn't put two people out of a job.
That's true.
They actively removed the driver from his job.
By framing
actively removed the housekeeper from her job. So that's where it starts to be like, okay, we're getting into some actions that are actually harming other people.
But okay, so the tutoring, yes, so that's a decent place to start. Harmless. And he's is it? I mean, is he fully tutoring her? Because then he starts to kind of get into the wildly inappropriate relationship with an underage girl. So, okay, he tutors her a little bit, and then it's a questionable relationship. So you get that up and down again. Then when you get to the art therapy, it's kind of a throwaway thing of like, okay, I'll let the kid doodle. I'm not actually doing anything that's going to help him, whether or not he actually has any mental issues. So then is she not stealing money from the family by not really doing what she was supposed to do? You see what I mean? That it's like slowly creeping up to worse
and
worse.
Just the fact that we have to have these conversations in our own mind as we're watching this is so beautiful.
I know, like, isn't it?
You go, oh, cool, she's getting away with it, and then you go, what's wrong with me? Why am I
right.
taking joy in this person leeching off this family?
Right.
No matter how I feel about the family.
Well, I could say that there's an argument to be made that therapy can be experiential. So the fact that she was just there with him, making art with him, an adult paying active, concerted attention to him, right? Because his mom, she's just a nervous wreck, isn't she? She can't even handle it,
I think that the suggestion is that the kid is fine. I feel like the suggestion is that the mom is worried about him because who knows, somebody said something.
Because he saw a ghost and had a seizure.
Yeah,
which, by the way, that was so scary of the eyes coming up out of the foot. Sorry, not to get ahead of him, but that was very spooky. No, to everybody's point, I think it's the fact that we're even having these discussions of kind of the sliding scale of ethics and morality is what's really challenging about this film, because then you're implicated as a viewer because that's the other thing, you know, you mentioned it, Sarah, when you showed that first still. I feel like a lot of times in movies, and for some reason, what's that movie with Amy Adams where she's like the Disney princess that comes to life?
Oh, is it Enchanted?
Enchanted. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I
I
don't
got
know
all
why
the
I'm
bad
thinking
movie
of
titles
that.
memorized.
Patrick Dempsey's in that movie, so I'm always like, oh, he's cute. But there's an element of when I think of like a big budget film or a fantastical film or something like that, right? We almost always think of like the shot is in the sky, and then it comes down and you see the city skyline, and then it comes down more and you see the street, and then it comes down more, and then you'd see like the basement window with Mr. Kim, and then you'd see the inside of the apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we get with this. You are immediately in the apartment with them. You're immediately with them as they're trying to get this Wi-Fi and get their internet. You know, you're with them when the mom kind of kicks him awake and says, stop pretending to be asleep. I know you're awake. You know, there's an immediacy to just being plunged into their world that kind of removes that idea of a God's eye viewpoint, which we oftentimes do get in film. That I think just immediately puts us on their team because we're right there in the basement with them. You know, we're not some omniscient audience that can see all of these sides. Again, we talked about that a lot in, you know, Twilight Zone, with there being kind of a single narrator, or, you know, the only exposition you get outside of the main character would be the Rod Serling character kind of giving you this voiceover. Similarly with this, that idea of, we really know what's happening with the Kim family. We don't know what happens with the Park family after, you know, the Kim family is not with them. So we basically, our POV is their POV. And that, I think, creates a sense of intimacy immediately with the audience that makes it really hard to not, like you said, empathize and sympathize with them and want them to succeed, even in tricking this kind of nervous Nelly mom into believing that she can provide therapy for the son that may or may not need it, you know? So it's a really interesting visual tactic, I think, that he kind of uses right away to be like, okay, y'all are in this with me too. We're all a part of the story.
When you started talking through that, of how we open in the basement and we have that establishing shot of they're below ground, they're in a dingy apartment and all that, I didn't really think about it until you started talking through it, of normally, at least speaking for American, you know, Hollywood style movies, but certainly around the world, other filmmakers utilize this with editing, of establishing the environment and the setting. Yes, you usually do go wide on it. You know, maybe it's like an aerial shot of a city or an exterior of a building, and then you work your way in until you meet the character and go from there, to kind of ground the audience in the location. And that's something that just doesn't really obviously happen in this movie. When we get into this like stairs and levels and like hierarchy geographically in this film, we'll go a little further, but we never really understand what is like that, like up high, you know, the sunny sky, the big establishing shot. We don't know like kind of where's a good spot geographically versus a bad spot, aside from, yes, the apartment's dingy, yes, their house is very beautiful, but and maybe I'm kind of stumbling through this a bit, but I was just trying to think of like, at what point do we see that their house is like high above and, you know, better and whatever than everything else, but we never actually see it in the same shot as their location. We always have these like little journeys trying to get up and up and up to their house, but we never get to pull back and see like a macroscopic view of the layout of the city. Are you guys tracking with what I'm saying here?
I think the first time that you see is in this shot that you've just pulled up, actually.
Right.
When he goes for that first interview, and he's just looking around in wonder, too, because it's almost like the first time he's ever walked up anywhere. He's always either going down or he's on the same level. And it's like, for the first time, he's going in this direction. And
right. But even here, we don't see their house. And I don't have a shot of it, but when he comes to the door, you don't see their house. It looks very similar to this shot
it's
here
kind of
that's
around
like
the
in an
corner.
alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up a poster design that does the opposite of what I'm saying here. Let's see.
I think it just adds to the mystery that the characters feel too. It lets us feel the same thing, where it's like, where is this utopian setting? Like, how did I get here? Like, why couldn't I find this before?
Right. So here's a couple different examples, and we'll come back to poster design later too, because there's so many beautiful posters and the fan art is amazing. But this is what I'm trying to get at, is these posters really clearly lay out where the house is and where they're coming from. And you can see that they're like on totally different planes. But through the movie, we're not getting that concept. And I think, I mean, this is fan art. These aren't official posters here. And this certainly maps it out for you. But I don't think that Bong Joon-Ho wanted us to see it like this. I think he wanted us to see it like a labyrinth. Kind of in the same way of like The Shining. I'm sure most people have heard about like the theory of the impossible layout. If you were to map out where they're walking down the hallways and try to like do a blueprint of the Overlook Hotel, it's an impossible layout. So it's a labyrinth and kind of adds to the crazy psychology of the film. And I feel like that's sort of an element that we're seeing here in Parasite, is that you don't really know, aside from their house being beautiful, that it's better or good, or I guess good is the right thing. Like if you do kind of a good versus evil. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Well,
And it's interest. Oh, sorry, you go first.
I was just going to say real quick, it's like when you're of that lower class, even being able to see where those places are is kept from you. It's purposely kept hidden from you, where it's like, you couldn't even get to these places if you wanted to, because we're not going to show you where those are. You stay down here. So
I have a counter to that, though, because
Ooh,
he
let's
does
hear it, girl.
eventually see the house from above in the final sequence after he gets out of the hospital and it's winter. He treks up to that forest or park. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's like a wooded area where he is, and he looks up and he looks down onto their home, because he finally has either found that spot, or now has there's like an impetus within him that wants to kind of see it from a different vantage point, because he knows his father is there, obviously. So he's kind of emotionally checking in, so that when the lights start to flicker with Morse code, he can see it. I would argue that until all of that happens, maybe there was a part of him that felt like he couldn't, not that it was away from him or inaccessible to him, because obviously it was. At a certain point, he is up there, and we are made to believe and assume that it is some sort of public property or area where he's not trespassing to be there. I don't know about you guys, but that was my takeaway, is that he wasn't like, on somebody else's land to see that. But maybe all of those other things had to happen to him first to give him the authority of self to be like, well, yeah, I'm going to go up and I'm going to go up and see their house. I'm going to go up and look down on it, And
I think it's important to note that only happens after his illusions have been shattered, after he wakes up in the hospital, and his illusions about being able to ever succeed in this way, his illusions about what the scholar's stone will bring to them, his illusions about his ability to worm his way into this society. He wakes up and he can't stop laughing, because he just thinks, what a big joke, like, why did I ever think that? And that's the only time that he's able to get to that higher point.
Yeah,
that's a really good idea.
When we were talking about it, I was just like, well, there is that one time, but I also wonder if there's any significance to the fact that it's snowy too, because it was pretty much perfect weather up until then, except for the one kind of rain. But even that was contextualized with, Mrs. Park being like, we're so grateful, we were so blessed with the rain because it pushed all the smog away. Meanwhile, that rain is what flooded them out of their home. So I think that there's maybe also something to the fact that it's very icy and cold. Maybe the way that he is now relating to their situation, like you said, is hardened and cold, and it's not that pristine, like, perfectly manicured lawn anymore.
Right.
Guys, we're getting into it. We really are.
That we are.
Imagine that. Us
I know.
getting into something.
Is that maybe the point of this whole event?
Don't worry, I'll tie it all back to Gilmore Girls eventually.
I knew it.
I almost, I tried to mock up a poster just for you, Virginia, that was Parasite with like a censored bar over
If
Paris's
you made
eyes.
that for me, I just want you to know I would print it out in full poster size and hang it up. So, also, side note for no one that will care, because everyone's probably like, shut up, woman. I did a which Gilmore Girls character were you quiz on BuzzFeed, and I got Paris, and I was like,
nice.
Yeah, that
One
seems
would
right.
only hope.
I
My
mean,
favorite.
cold, calculating, but she gets it done.
Could Paris survive in the world of Parasite? Hell yes, she could.
Oh,
She'd be in that
yeah.
home running things in a week tops.
She would remind me of the sister in a way where she's like, you can't be in this room. Sorry.
Yeah, this is how we're doing this, right?
Also, no, I don't know how to make ramdon. So you're either going to have to teach me, or, you know, if you give me an ingredient list and a recipe, I'll make it. But other than that, no. Like, all right, I'll stop talking about Gilmore Girls now.
All right. I wanted to... Oh, sorry, I am screwing this up. There we go. Okay, I wanted to get back to kind of this stairs thing, the theme throughout the movie. And sorry, I had to shuffle around some slides because I realized they were out of order. So even with the architecture of the house, we have stairs very prominent throughout the film. As you can see there, we talked about how the Kim family is always on a journey upwards to try to get to this house and try to get out of the basement location. And no matter what they do, they're going to have to go up, because we established that in the beginning they are at the lowest point possible. And yeah, so even when they do go down when the rain starts and there's a flood and they're trying to get back to the apartment, that's when we're seeing them go down. But stairs, I think, certainly plays into what we were talking about earlier of, you know, kind of working your way up with pushing boundaries, working your way up socioeconomically, different things like that, trying to climb the ladder. So I was thinking about stairs, as one does, you know,
Sure.
and listening to the score of this movie, which is by Jail Jung, who, by the way, is not formally trained. He is self-taught.
Oh, wow.
Which is fantastic. He's scored some other films, but with this one, he was working very closely with Bong Joon-Ho on it. And so Jail Jung, I know he can play like the piano, the guitar, the drums, I think one other instrument, and can also apparently compose for an orchestra. Like, it's amazing that he's self-taught and has come up with such a beautiful score. But the opening song, when I was listening to it, I thought there was something really interesting about it. And I have, there's the sheet music right there. So I wish that Hayes was here and I was texting him phone a friend style of like, please tell me what the terminology is for this thing I'm trying to explain. And he said it's text painting. So Hayes and I talked about John Williams, which there's going to be potentially another John Williams event coming up. We'll get to that at the end of this event tonight. But we were talking about John Williams and specifically talking about Indiana Jones. And Hayes was teaching me about, you know, a leitmotif, which is a score for a character. So if you think of like Darth Vader, what do you think of? The Imperial March, right? So that's kind of like his leitmotif. It's a score for the character that gives it some, more depth to it too, and some personality. So text painting is kind of similar, but in a broader stroke. Pun partially intended there, you're welcome. It's more storytelling orally, if that makes sense. So if you think of Indiana Jones, the dun 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 dun, right? So there's like kind of up and down like that, crescendo. And this is why Hayes needs to be here. I took piano lessons when I was like this
there.
big, you know. Okay, so
It's
cool.
okay.
Fill in the blanks. Caleb can edit this. We'll fix it in post. So Indiana Jones, though, where it's like up and down with his score, you could listen to that soundtrack with no context of the movie Indiana Jones or the character, and I would bet money that you could kind of come up with a story that's similar of like going on adventures and there's highs and lows to it, right? So that's text painting, that it's a score that's very parallel to the story and paints that picture orally. So what I was noticing with the opening score for Parasite, specifically if you're looking at the bass clef, is that right?
Good.
That's right.
That's
Okay,
good.
thanks.
Yes.
Yes, I'm winning. All right, so the bass section that I have highlighted there, if you're looking at the notes, they are ascending much like stairs and then kind of go down and up and down and up. And the way that it sounds is kind of like somebody creeping up the stairs, like da-da-da, da-da-da, and then back down. And I just thought that was really fantastic. And I was trying to listen to different podcasts with Jill Jung to see if he put in any kind of music theory like that, like text painting. So far, I haven't stumbled upon him saying, indeed, he did that intentionally. But I thought, even if it's a happy accident, like how perfect is it that the score even ties into this stair kind of theory? And I'm really bummed that this didn't win an Oscar for Best Score because it is just beautiful. It's an incredible score.
It's he definitely didn't do it by accident. No one does that kind of stuff by accident, even if they don't know they're doing it. Especially music composers who have a really good grip on what the story is and what the themes are, and have a really good communication with the director, like he did with Bong Joon-Ho. Somebody would say, well, any melody is going to have ascending and descending notes, but this, when you listen to this, it sounds like stairs. It sounds like stairs, and it sounds like, we get a little bit higher up here, but then we have to kind of go lower here, then we get a little higher up there. It sounds like this incremental, like, okay, we gained a little bit, we lost a little bit, we gained a little bit more, we lost a little bit more. So that's definitely on purpose. Have you guys listened to the Soundtrack Show podcast?
I have not heard of it.
Listeners, the Soundtrack Show, the greatest podcast of all time about movie scores, and if you love John Williams and if you love Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all that kind of stuff, Back to the Future, the only thing that you need to listen to where I can't remember the name of the guy right now, but he's a musicologist, and he explains exactly what you're hearing and why it makes your brain tie into these blockbuster classics. That's my plug. Sorry. It's you don't need to listen to anything else, honestly. It's amazing.
That's cool. I want to check that out. I was listening to, oh gosh, what was it called? Let me see. Score the Podcast was the one that I was listening to that was getting into this, and they got into, I think they were talking about Okja as well, with Jill Jung, but getting into how he wrote the Parasite score and how very particular Bong Joon-Ho was, but Jill didn't take it as like, I don't know, micromanagey or anything like that. It was like, no, he has a very clear vision. He's the artist. I mean, he's writing and directing this, and so it only makes sense that he can hear what he wants to have in the film, so they worked together very well and came up with this brilliant score for it. Okay, let's see. So let's jump back to a question that we had earlier and kind of a theme that's come up. So I know this is a different type of film, as Caleb mentioned in the beginning, that it's almost like two different films, two different stories. We have quite a pivot in the middle, and some other films do that too, but it's still a singular narrative. We're really following the Kim family. So you would think that there would be a very clear protagonist and antagonist in the film, but I have a hard time defining who is the protagonist and antagonist in this, and I'm curious what you guys think. Is there a singular protagonist and antagonist? Does it change? Virginia, let's throw it to you. What do you think about that?
So I think the original housekeeper is actually the protagonist of the film, because if you were to take the story from just her point of view, right? She's protecting her husband, who is on the lam, as it were, but from like loan sharks. So he's not really in trouble with the law, but he's in trouble with people who are out to harm him physically. When she shows up in the rain when they're camping, when the parks are camping, you can tell that she's been beat up, presumably by these loan sharks. So she's taking the beating for her man as well. And then she basically risks everything that she has in that moment to make sure that he's okay, because she knows that he's gone days without food. And all of the things that she does are in service of protecting her husband. I don't really see her ever kind of acting in a way that feels self-serving, right? Even her kind of being able to keep her job in between the owners and all of that stuff, she's hiding her husband because she's protecting him. She's keeping him safe. And, I even liked the reveal that, when Mr. Park says that the only thing wrong with her was that she ate enough for two people, eventually when that kind of reveal is that her husband's there, you're like, oh, maybe she was sneaking him food. And she said, no, I always bought him food out of my own pay. I never stole food, So there was an element of all of that to me that, like, if we were to have watched this story from her point of view from the beginning, I think we would probably think of her as the main protagonist, who then, finds a heroic end because she gets kicked down the stairs and cracks her head. And even in her last kind of dying moments is trying to be with her husband and help get him free. And, and then kind of has to succumb to the fact that she has a concussion and stuff. But like, I weirdly think that she is like the secret protagonist of the film, that we just don't get more of her story, but everything that we are able to see seems above board. She seems to be a kind, caring, attentive person who is just, her one misstep, if we're even going to call it that, is that she's like hiding her husband in the secret part of the house, which for all intents and purposes, other than accidentally causing a potential psychosis moment for the son, right, really did not affect harm to that family. And there was no intention to affect harm. There was also no intention to really better her situation. She wasn't doing it for any other reason, I think, than of a selfless act to protect her husband. So I'm actually going to say housekeeper number one is the secret protagonist of the film. And I apologize because I cannot remember her character's name.
Moon Gwang, I believe is her name.
So I will not do her the disservice of mispronouncing that, but yes.
Yeah, I think we all just had an unspoken agreement at the beginning that we're not going to even try with the names. It's fine. Just say housekeeper, Kim, well, father, they even Park, kind of father.
They give us that in the moment when they're like, the madam is like, "We'll call you Kevin," and I was like,
"Yeah, completely unprompted. Your name is Kevin.
You did that for us. We are ignorant and cannot pronounce things with our Western mouths, but to that end, yeah, she's like the secret protagonist for me, and you wouldn't expect it. So maybe, and I'm happy to be shot down by anyone who thinks that that's wrong. But like, honestly, when that question came up in the notes that I only read 10 minutes before we got on the stream today, because I have a 13-month-old and a full-time job, and life is crashing around me some days. That was immediately where my mind went, like immediately, without even a second thought, because none of the other people feel like genuine protagonists, even in their own lives, right? If only because the exposition that we get for them reveals them to be lacking in one way or another, and maybe at first you think it's going to be Mr. Park, but then he's like, yeah, sure, we'll call it love. I love my wife. And it's just like the most depressing way to answer that, question. And I don't get a sense that he's doing anything like cheating on her or, being unfaithful, but there's an element of like, they've kind of built their castle of, apathy that they're all living in. And I don't know if that makes for a good protagonist, but what do you guys think?
Well, I think I think you're on the right track as far as from a moral perspective, that normally in a traditional narrative, protagonist has morals and values or learns them over time. But I'd say based on the beginning of our conversation where we just yeeted morals right out the window, I think I would knock that down, but I mean, we'll see what Caleb thinks. The other thing too, if you're thinking from like, again, traditional screenwriting perspective, the protagonist should be ever present in the story and the antagonist should be there, you know, maybe close to 75% of the movie. Is that always the case? Absolutely not. But if you try to think about it from that perspective of like, okay, how much screen time does this person have? What about their character arc? Are they learning any lessons? That's usually another telltale sign of who the protagonist or antagonist is. But yeah, morals yeeted, you know, whatever. Caleb, what do you think? Do you agree with her? Do you have a different theory on who the protagonist is?
I think that Virginia has the correct answer. I disagree with it.
Whoa.
But I think the important thing is that Bong Joon-Ho doesn't care if you know who the protagonist and antagonist are. And I see this in his other films as well. I think his main signature is genre subversion. This is a film where a cell phone is wielded as a weapon where normally a gun would be, where a bag of peaches is a weapon where maybe a bomb would be in another film. And in some of his other most successful films as well, these are characters who, you know, they're detectives who don't solve the crime. They're fathers who don't save their daughters. They're, you know, people in this film where by the end of it, the son has this pipe dream of potentially saving his father and being successful, and we're left to believe that there's no possible way that could ever happen. So I think if he's playing around with themes like that, he's also forcing you to sit there and think about the role of any of the characters and whether they're protagonist or antagonist. And I know that he's also highly influenced by directors and writers who presented us with the same kind of characters, going back to the 60s and 70s, of you know, difficult central characters where you think, I'm rooting for this guy, but why am I rooting for this guy? I'm rooting for this character, but they're not good people. What is that about? I mean, you know, how many of those characters come up in Scorsese films, one of his big heroes? How many of those characters are in, you know, Spike Lee films or something like that, where these are really three-dimensional people who you can't say, well, he's a good person or he's a bad person. You know, good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things at the drop of a hat.
I think that's a very valid point. Yeah, and again, this film is not traditional since it's kind of a two-part thing too, like any other movie it's all, you know, one big movie, but it feels like a couple different stories, like Psycho. Again, your protagonist is shifting for each half of it. And I think you could make that argument with this one. I would have to disagree with you guys saying that the housekeeper number one is the protagonist. I think you could either go the route of the Kim family as a whole being a protagonist, like an entity, versus the Park family. But more so, if I have to actually narrow it down to one, I'm going to say Mr. Kim is the protagonist. And perhaps Mr. Park is the antagonist. And I say that because Mr. Kim seems to have the strongest through-line journey and sort of a central question, which is a big part of defining a protagonist. Also, same thing with the character arc and development and everything like that. And if you think of who's like really overcoming battles, I mean, you have an actual like showdown at the end. And who does the camera really focus on in the birthday party massacre, you know? And it's focusing on him and defeating the husband that was in the basement, and then kind of overcoming this issue with Mr. Park of like I think, doesn't he get back to like the stench thing or like makes a face, and so it kind of circles back to that. So I think if we're getting into that, and of course I don't necessarily have the right answer because I didn't write this film, and I think Caleb's point of Bong Joon-Ho probably doesn't really want us to know who it is, but from an academic perspective, I would say that it's Mr. Kim versus Mr. Park, and Mr. Kim has the clear like character arc, but then so does Kevin too, because he has the like epilogue at the end where he's kind of changing too. So that's kind of why I'm back and forth between, is it the Kim family as a whole, or are we kind of shifting protagonists? I don't know. It's tough, but all the more reason to love this film. It's just so deep, and there's so many different layers to it. It's really fun to pull apart. So speaking of the families, I want to pose a question for you guys. So with let's see, I think the official poster was the one that you see on the left, and if I understand correctly, the poster that's on the right with the white censor bars came out with like the digital release of the film. But first, let's dissect, what do we think the point of or the meaning is for having the censor bars over the eyes? Just looking at the one on the left. Caleb, what do you think?
I'm sure you have an amazing answer for this. I don't have a clue. I honestly, it was one of those things that when I first saw the poster, before I knew anything about the film and before I'd seen it, you know, you can tell it's provocative. You can tell that, you know, it's mysterious, but it really doesn't give anything away about the plot. But I have a feeling that you have something really good to say about this. I hope you do, because I don't. Virginia, let's bring it over to you.
That's the best non-answer.
Sorry. I'm not going to pretend I know something.
He should be a politician, man. Deflecting.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know the answer, but I've got a teammate that does. If you elect me, I mean, my first immediate thought is sort of hiding your eyes typically denotes some sort of dishonesty, right? Eye diversion, not clear eye contact, looking down. All my research into the way people lie mostly comes from like CSI, so it's pretty limited. But I do know that when people lie, they tend to look away. They tend to not make very clear eye contact. So I kind of immediately just assumed like, oh, everyone's playing a role. Everyone's playing a version of themselves that's maybe not particularly true. Obviously, with the Kim family, it's quite obvious. But then I think with the Park family, you know, we could look at the son not being particularly special, but leaning into it and kind of dazing off wistfully because he knows that his mom is going to take it as some sort of artistic stroke of inspiration or genius, you know, and the mom, you know, hides things from her husband, you know, don't tell him because I will, you know, the way that she, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but she says sort of like, I'll get in trouble, you know, and then I think the daughter is probably just like any teen girl at that time, you know, still coming into her own and finding herself, but she is very much hiding her relationship with Kevin, trying to pretend that that is just tutor, student, above board. And then Mr. Park, I think probably, you know, if I had to guess, is hiding behind this facade of marriage and fatherhood. He seems to be a genuinely engaged father, but I keep just going back to the scene in the car. And I think it's also because I watched the new season of The Crown this week, and there's this famous interview that Prince Charles and Princess Diana gave right after they got engaged. And the reporter was like, you guys are so beautiful and obviously in love, right? And she's very demure and she's like, obviously, of course, you know. And then Prince Charles, no lie, looks at the camera and says, whatever in love means. Ooh, which is layers of rough I can't even get into right now because this is not a podcast about The Crown. But I think that there's something deep in the exploration of sort of marital relationships and what they can evolve into if they did start with love and with the intention of legally binding yourself to someone because you love them and you want to be with them. I think a lot of what we explore in terms of storytelling revolving around marriage tend to kind of go back to what are the faces that we present within the unit, and then what is the face that we present when we are alone. And so that was a really long-winded answer for all that, but since Caleb abstained, I figured I had twice as much time. But that's kind of my vibe, is like, okay, everybody's like hiding behind something, and then we kind of get to, know what it is as the film unfolds.
I think that's good. I mean,
that was all you said, but
it's
good.
fine.
No, I'm trying to process, and honestly, like my answer. I mean, I have a little bit of an answer, and I had to do some digging and research on other people's theories with this because it's tough. But I mean, that's the nature of this film, is it's pretty complex. But I guess kind of piggybacking off of Virginia's theory, like with the bar and kind of hiding behind it, my mind was going more to, and I always say the word wrong, anonymity. I can't say it.
Anonymity.
Thank you. Oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't. Being
Even
anonymous. Yes,
Being
thank
anonymous, just say that.
Being anonymous. I mean, if you think about like in the news or something like that, to hide someone's identity, aside from blurring out their faces, if you have to simplify it, blocking out the eyes is usually a go-to like this. So I kind of took it as like, this could be anyone. It's not a specific person. And when in the beginning of the conversation of like, I've been there where I was leeching off of someone else's Wi-Fi, or, I was hustling like 3 different jobs or whatever it is, of being able to kind of live vicariously or like plug yourself into any of these characters. And that could be me, that could be my friend, that could be my neighbor, whatever. That's kind of how I took it. But I saw this other theory that was really interesting, and I believe the website was like Quora.com, Quora. And it was specifically talking about literal parasites, that a lot of them don't have eyes, right? So how do they see like where to go, and what they can sense light and darkness? And so they're using their like non-eyes to absorb the light to see if they're underground or need to get above ground.
I don't like that. I mean, I like
cool?
the theory, but
I knew you had a good answer.
that's science.
Yeah, but that's not mine. Right. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting, of like trying to seek out the light and get above ground. And I know that light, as far as the like production design of this film, was pretty significant. Let me actually see if I can hop back to a picture here. So when they were designing the lighting for the apartment underground, here we go. This doesn't do it much justice, but it was fluorescent lighting, which even the room I'm in right now, fluorescent lighting is awful. Nobody loves fluorescent lighting unless you were, what's his name, Christian Bale in The Machinist, then you might like flickering fluorescent lights. But it's harsh, it's kind of cold, it's very industrial, it's irritating, especially if it's flickering or you hear the buzzing going on. And so the only lighting that they had in their underground apartment was this, unnatural lighting that's irritating, and then the little bit of light that's coming through that window, but not much natural light, right? And then to juxtapose that with, clicking through here, when we get to, where's a good picture of the house? When we get to their house, of course, it's like prominently windows.
The whole one wall is just a giant window in their living room.
Yeah, wow. I guess I don't have a good picture of it, but here's Here's one. So most of the house is comprised of windows like this, but even if we look at the lighting that they have within, it's a lot of like tungsten style lighting, soft lighting, like the lamp that you see there and little accent lights, but a lot of daylight coming in and just a very bright environment. So of course I think there's a really good parallel there with this Parasite idea of like searching for that light, and going the further above ground you go, the more light that you get.
Well, it also sort of references the idea that if the Kim family lives at street level, their environment is lit by that, but at least they've got a little bit of sunlight creeping in. The housekeeper's husband is below that even. He's in this sub-basement with literally no sunlight access ever. So it's like, as low as you are, there's always someone lower than you.
And it's interesting, now that you point that out, that the husband that's in that like bunker rarely comes up and doesn't seem to be striving to get upstairs. So does that speak to kind of the parasite, or the level of parasite, if we're gonna rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 for parasitizing?
Yeah.
He's not maybe as bad as the others because he's not seeking that out as heavily. Like, yes, he is freeloading off of their house, but is he really? I mean, they don't even know about that space. So is he a bad guy? Not really. We talk about how his wife never took food from the Park family to feed her husband. She would always bring him food that she paid for. So,
well, and he also spends his free time turning on the lights for the husband literally every time he walks up the stairs. Forget about sending him Morse code messages about like, praise you and God bless you and everything, but like the fact that every time the husband walks up the stairs, he assumes that it's a sensor light and that it's the guy listening, like hitting the lights at the exact same moment. That's one of the most insane little touches I've ever seen in a movie. That's crazy.
It's incredible. It's
like he feels like that's his duty. That's his job underground. It's like, this guy's so important that when he comes home, I have to turn on the lights for him as he walks up the stairs.
Right.
That's awesome.
I just love the little details like that throughout this film. It's astounding. Wanted to pull up another thing while we're talking about the windows, and actually when I pulled up this image here too, another theme that's prominent throughout this, literally and figuratively, is drawing lines. So we already talked about how the Kim family is living underground, and we have the Park family that's above ground. So you have that divide, which is, of course, it parallels to like socioeconomic status of being above ground or below ground. But the subtle details of having little lines like this to show that divide, the class divide. So in this case, he's looking out the window. It's just the corner of the glass coming together, but you don't see the Kim family or anyone that's beneath the Park family cross that barrier. So she's on the right, the lower class folks are on the left, and you see things like this throughout. Even, when you're driving, the way that they're framing it here too, that you have Mr. Kim that's on the right, and the mom that's on the left there. And so you have like this divide. I didn't get the shot of when they're like walking upstairs, the mom and Kevin, but with the ceiling tiles, there's like a line on the ceiling too. And the way that they're blocked in the shot is still separating. So it's just really fascinating, these like subtle details to emphasize the like class divide between them.
Well, yeah, Mr. Park's obsession is whether or not people cross the line. He says that like 5 times in the film, and that's what, Virginia, you mentioned it earlier in the birthday party scene, where it's it's almost like Mr. Park is okay palling around with Mr. Kim as long as that intimacy is never breached, where it's like, no matter what's going on here, I'm still asking you to do this thing, I'm still paying you to do this thing, so you don't get to complain, you don't get to control the situation. If I tell you to put on this headdress and go and attack my son for, the pageantry of the party, you will do this, or you'll be gone.
Yeah. Sorry, Virginia, you want to add something?
It's a different, the still that you brought up with her sleeping at the table. I just can't stop thinking about the like scene later when they're like fooling around and she's like, buy me drugs, and she just like says it. And so like, I just, a quick cue. Do we just think she's just like a full-blown drug addict and that's why she's like always waking up from a nap and like that's her vibe? What did you guys think about that?
No, it's because they're talking about the possibility that the driver, their original driver,
it was a role
had
play
a
thing.
girlfriend who he had gotten drug dependent on.
Okay. Because I had a
So
moment
that played into their fantasy of like, ooh, what if I was the driver and you were the girl and you were the prostitute?
Why is she napping in that scene then?
Well, I feel like they're setting it up for kind of a stereotypical housewife, you know? If, like,
she's got nothing to do. She's like, she can fall asleep at any time of the day. Like somebody, you know, the housekeeper will take care of it, whatever it is. She can just pass out whenever.
Fair.
Right.
Okay, you guys are right. Okay, you talked me back down. I had a moment where I was like, is she just like a full-on drug addict?
No, I think that was definitely like a second watching.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah, definitely. But to kind of continue on this like class divide and then talking about the Park family parasitizing those that are beneath them, I think the best example of that is actually the Ramadan, which I know that there was a spike in searches for Ramadan recipes, and ramen noodle or udon noodles, we all know like cheap noodles that you buy, 25 cents a pack or something like that. And most of us have been there. Maybe some still are there, you know, where you're buying those. And so that's... I was
gonna say, they're in my pantry right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Beef flavored.
Right. Did you say beef flavor? Chicken flavor, dude. What's up? But anyway, so
be the divide.
We all understand the context, the like socioeconomic context, that these packets are quick and easy options for meals, but they're really cheap, so prominent for lower class families. So what Ramadan is, though, is a mixture of these cheap packets of noodles and traditionally a very expensive cut of meat is what she's asking for. I think she said a sirloin or like a Wagyu steak that she wants to cut up and put within this really inexpensive meal. And so if that's not a great metaphor for this like class divide and her kind of taking advantage or, I don't know, appropriating it, you know what I mean? It's just really fascinating that it's even with a meal that seems like a fleeting moment of like, oh yeah, I want Ramadan, throw the Wagyu steak in there, whatever, and you don't really think much of it, but it just goes to show how they sort of walk all over the lower class, which is just fascinating.
It's in fact so metaphorical.
So metaphorical, right? This whole film.
I was like, I think the fanciest thing I've ever put on ramen was like a fried egg with like a runny yolk. It's really good. But that's literally like the top of what I would, you know, add to that, because like the idea that I would even be able to buy meat in excess is like, oh cool, they just have like a fresh steak in the fridge.
Right.
What a life.
Yeah, let's just scrounge through the fridge. What'd you find? Oh, very expensive steak. All right, toss it on there. I don't really care.
I guess I'll eat it.
Yeah. Well, and to that note too, the fan art, the poster art that's out there, I only pulled a handful of them, but some are really fantastic and really beautiful. I thought this was really cool to follow up on the food concept of, you know, sort of this trickle down. Other great ones here, there was one, let's see, I love kind of the minimalist thing and laying it out again so you can like see, you know, who's above ground and below ground and the difference between those class divides.
Can we just admit that the peach is like really having a moment right now?
Yeah, we were just talking about
Call Me by Your Name. It's like the peach is just having a moment.
I almost brought the slide from Ratchet into this conversation.
Oh yeah, Ratchet! I forgot about that. That's 3 moments. Wow.
The peach.
The peach, star of 2019 People's Choice Award.
So where was it? Okay, so here's an interesting one that the Criterion Collection release of the DVD or Blu-ray, sorry, VHS, whatever. uses Morse code that on the right there, it spells out Parasite. And no, I don't know Morse
Whoa.
code. It's actually
Cool.
on
I didn't
the,
even realize that. What an
Yeah.
idiot.
there you
That's
go.
cool.
I only knew what it was by looking at their little cheat sheet here, which is
Oh.
great. But yeah, that's the design there. But then I was looking at this fan art that's on the left, and I'm trying to like read my own note. So that it's a cool poster, a neat idea, you know, simple, the lights, the stairs, cool, and putting Morse code in there. But that, if I'm not mistaken, translates to VGKV5G. So, note to designers, you might want to make sure you know what your Morse code is saying. Might have been better to spell out Parasite or something, but I don't know, maybe there's a different meaning to that. So, anyway, I just thought that was really neat.
Maybe 5G is like the Wi-Fi they're trying to get. That one's
Or
really
is it like
sure.
getting into the conspiracy thing about 5G and I don't know, does it give people cancer or something like that? Who
I was
knows?
going to say, I'm sorry, I'm not deep enough on Facebook for stuff
Let's
like that. So,
Yeah, no.
I don't know.
All right, there was something else I was getting at here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to back it up to a picture we were referencing earlier. Well, a lot of pictures, a lot of frames that we're seeing in this film, you see them ascending to the upper left there, and even the direction that the street is going here when Kevin is on his journey to their house is going up and to the left. And I know Caleb has heard this theory, but like I gotta put it in anytime I possibly can. But if you pay attention to the framing of this, yes, girl, yes, you know what I'm talking about.
knew it.
Quadrants theory, dude. Quadrants, right? So it's really neat that the subtext of the framing too kind of plays into this theory. And so for those who are not really familiar with this or haven't heard me say it at probably literally every Cinema Lab event ever, is just a theory of how we subconsciously frame pictures or films, you know, when you're trying to frame the image. And no, it's not usually intentional. It's typically kind of a subconscious decision of putting negative stuff on what we know is like the negative plane for quadrants. So the left side is usually negative, and of course the lower portion is the most negative. And then the right is usually kind of good, positive, you know, the upper half is positive. So even if we think about the house, their house is up, the dingy apartment is down, positive, negative, you know, it just kind of plays into our culture. But yeah, the way that they frame things kind of going, instead of, you would think traditionally that like his journey with the going up that sidewalk, trying to get to their house, you would think that you would go, and I'm going to try to do this in the correct direction, right? Okay, so the lower left quadrant, you would think the apartment, dingy, bad situation, I want to go up. So you're going from the worst place possible and going up to the best place possible, but it's not that. We're going in the other direction of like, you know, here we go, positive, negative. I can't do this backwards in the camera. Positive, negative, and then negative, positive. So it's not really like a good, fully positive journey. It's kind of telling you that something's a little off kilter, that it's not going to be a great thing, that there could be something wrong. So I thought their decision of like direction in the frame was really fascinating.
Well, also the idea of like positive and negative together existing in both of their planes is like what we've been talking about everyone is capable of good and bad, and those ideas kind of making not a neutral person, but existing within the same personhood kind of means like, oh, they're maybe more on equal plane than we would think.
Right. Well, and to go back to this poster design, the one that's on the right that came out with the digital release of the film, that they change the Park family to have the white bars. And you would think that that means Park family is good, Kim family is bad. But when you watch the movie, you know that nobody is purely good or evil. They're all kind of bad and manipulative and, you know, that kind of thing. So I thought that was really fascinating. But then let me just go back to the quadrants real quick here.
What does it have to do with that amazing musician that you've got placed in the lower left quadrant there?
What do we think it has to do? Negative, negative?
Two negatives cancel and make a positive. No.
Not quite. Who is this lovely gentleman?
Looks like a BG, but that's just a guess based on the
that
hair.
would be Kenny Loggins.
That is
Oh,
Kenny
really?
Loggins. Yes.
Oh, dang.
Because my very dated joke that I always use in class when I'm teaching the quadrants theory is that when you're in the lower left quadrant, you're in the Kenny Loggins danger zone, right? Because
Wow.
usually, yes, I had to put him in there. But really, usually when somebody, if you think about like a battle where somebody is being attacked by a monster, usually the person who's in the most danger is cornered to the lower left. So we call it like a danger zone because you have, something massive that's towering over you and pushing you into that dangerous environment. And typically it doesn't seem like there's any hope to get out of it. So yes, Kenny Loggins had to make an appearance here.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now that you come back to the chat, you'll allow it. Now that I'm walked back into the room. All right.
Yes. Can we also just take a moment to admire the production design with the house?
Yeah, if you guys didn't know about the house, I didn't know about the house the first time I saw the film. Why would you? It's so masterfully done. And I know that Sarah
cool.
is kind of an expert on this.
Not much of an expert, but I do know that when they were doing location scouting for this house, which they built for this movie, that they were finding or looking for a perfect place as far as lighting. And we were talking about the importance of lighting earlier, of like having, natural light come in and just flood the environment and be beautiful, but also trying to consider lighting for the sake of shooting, which is, working with natural light for shooting, as every filmmaker, photographer knows, is really tough to chase that light. You have the golden hour, but as time goes on, the sun is moving and you got to keep resetting. So it's tricky for that. The other thing too is the production designer who's part of designing this house. You're trying to design a house that's like a big part of it in the story is the architect that designed it too. So trying to like get up to that level, what a challenge. And I can't believe that this did not win for production design, but it was nominated. And I was really bummed that it didn't win because it's just beautiful. The amount of detail that they put into the production design and even art direction too. But
And we should say that what we're looking at here is that there is no second level to this house.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you see above the first level from the outside here is CG.
Right.
And in watching the movie, the house is such a physical character in the film. At no point do you ever think, oh, if I went around that corner, there would just be nothing there. Or if I looked down here, there would be nothing there. It seems like it's a real place. Obviously they built it, but like parts of it are not there, as you can see from this illustration.
Right. I would have never guessed this. And honestly, I didn't know about the second level and the blue screening until I saw these pictures that you pulled up.
Yeah, I never would have guessed it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just beautiful design. And
and Bong Joon-Ho basically sketched it out for the architect to make for the set. I know that there was some back and forth between them where, he said, well, this is crazy. Like, a house would never be like this. Your sketches are meaningless. But Bong said, well, I don't know, make it anyway. Like, we're not making a house for people to live in. We're making a house for me to make a movie in. But the fact that it still feels like a house that's real, that people are really living in, is kind of incredible.
I knew nobody would ever really have that many plates on a wall.
Ooh, yeah.
Wall of plates. Come on.
Amazing, though.
yeah. Well, that's
cool,
interesting
but
It's maximalist for sure.
Right. But the fact that the folks on set who can kind of reference of like, no, nobody would design a house like that, and Bong Joon-Ho saying, let's eat realism out the window too, I think that's neat that it kind of ties back to the concept with The Shining and Stanley Kubrick.
Do you think he actually said, hey guys, crew meeting, just real quick, above the line only, I just every department we are going to yeet reality a little bit.
Oh yeah,
Right
definitely.
now, we're just going to collectively yeet it. Individually in all of our different processes, we're going to yeet it. I just want, and then do you think the crew shirts that he made, like on the front said Parasite, and then on the back just said yeet? Because I'd like to think that that's true,
I mean,
personally.
definitely.
It's entirely
Yeet.
possible.
Right.
Again, here comes this peach.
I know. I love it. All right. Well, I know we've been talking a whole lot about this movie, and there's a lot more to talk about. So let's kind of wind it down. Before we get into recommendations for our viewers and listeners and what they should watch or read or listen to next, do you guys have any last thoughts on Parasite? Anything that you're dying to talk about?
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but I think the thing that I love most about the movie really has nothing to do with the movie, is it just really introduced Bong Joon-Ho to a global audience. And I know that South Korea had won, I think, a few Academy Awards before, but this is the first Best Picture win for South Korea, which is huge. And I don't know. There was so much joy around watching him get the recognition that I think so many of us know and feel that he deserves, So for that to happen on a global scale, right? Because it wasn't just within South Korea. It wasn't just at Cannes and getting the Palme d'Or. It wasn't just the Academy Awards. It was pretty much like a clean sweep of the entire award season. And all of that being said, awards mean nothing, right? Like there is
They mean nothing, but they can symbolize a lot, though.
They symbolize a lot. And much like the curse of Star Baker in Great British Baking Show, right? We have a lot of people that have won an Academy Award or won a Best New Artist Grammy, and then they become Milli Vanilli, and they're never heard from again, neither to Milli or Vanilli in the future. And so there is something to be said for the fact that, like, really awards mean nothing. But in absence of the idea that anybody else's opinion matters when you're creating art, the democracy of filmmaking, and seeing that team be recognized within a society of their peers was wholeheartedly fulfilling to me as someone who, like, I love to be like, I'm a filmmaker and I'm a podcaster and I'm a writer. And every time I type it, it sounds exactly like that, right? A voice comes out that is obnoxious and weird. I do all of those things. And I'm now in a position where I get paid to do all of those things as part of my job. Wonderful, right? No one in this triad of very talented people is on that level yet, and we have not created something that's been so universally lauded, not only by the audiences, but by our peers, that I can't help but feel, one, just like an overwhelming happiness for him, because I think there's something that happens to me now in my old age when I just watch, and there's a psychology to this, right? But like when I watch people, like, they got 3 sharks on Shark Tank, you guys, like, weeping, right? Like a farmer from Florida, got all 4 sharks to say, I believe in what you're doing. I'm going to help you make your little plastic, water containers, and you're going to sweep the nation. And now they're all in Lowe's. And every time I see it or hear about it, I'm like crying, because he is so wholeheartedly in it. And so I think there's something to be said about just being, like, so happy for him, for this team, for these actors that, as far as I could understand, were really lauded already in their home country of South Korea. So to see them get that recognition on such a global scale felt so, I don't know, like, I was so happy for them. And I don't know them, guys. Like, I've never met any of them, but there was such a genuine feeling of, like, y'all did it. Good for you, And then the second part of that is there's a part of that aspirational flame that burns within, me now, to be like, I could do it. Not that specifically, but I can do my thing. I can do me, and there will be people that will like it. And I'm sure that there's a huge part of people that have watched this film that didn't get it or didn't like it, or his other films that didn't get it or didn't like it. But to have such a singular voice, to have such a singular idea, and be able to, like we've kind of all hit on, right? Like the composer kind of bowed to that. It wasn't this push and pull of, no, I'm going to create the composition that I want. It was like, this is his film, I'm going to compose for his film. To see someone with such a singular vision just continue to be themselves and then get so lauded as well, there's such a nice, like, warm fireside feeling I get when I think about that. And it was just nice to see that happen, because we've had, especially with the Academy Awards, right, it does not have a great track record of like honoring the films that necessarily deserve to be honored, because like all awards shows, it can oftentimes be a popularity contest. And so it was just nice that the guy I wanted to win won, and he gave a platform to the people that seemed to be doing their thing for a long time, and he didn't have to make a big budget American film to do it. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, having seen, again, thanks to Sarah, having seen Parasite before the Oscars, and having seen 1917 before the Oscars, 1917 was such the obvious win. It was like, well, should be Parasite, but I know it's going to be 1917. And to be there and watching it live on that night, it was so surprising and it was so exciting. And all of their reactions, from Bong Joon-Ho's to all the actors, to the producers, to Mickey Lee, the financier, who helped bring it into fruition. Like, it was such a genuine reaction on their part, and there was such an electricity in the audience too, that like you can't fake that. Like there's a reason why that happened. The reason is that the movie is extraordinary. The reason is it's an electric experience, and it's a work of art made by someone who was putting everything that they had into it. And it was the culmination of decades worth of their own work finally, becoming what it needs to be. And I didn't expect to have that experience, awards shows for sure, but also, just blockbuster films and popular films and critically acclaimed films for a long time before that had kind of seemed so predictable. So for this to happen in this way was just very exciting. And I was just rewatching the other night, just some of those Oscar clips, and it just still gives you that really excited vibe. And I don't know, it just really ties into the whole experience when you know the backstory and what it eventually was.
It was a pleasant surprise to see it win in the same way that the movie was a pleasant surprise.
Yep.
So I too am really glad that it won and swept all the awards, no matter what they do or do not mean. But they deserved it. So, well, that's a nice note to end on. So why don't we pass the mic around and give some recommendations of what to watch or read or listen to next. Caleb always has fantastic recommendations and quite a few of them. So let's see if he can narrow it down to maybe one or two.
I know. I got two.
Ooh, all right.
I know. I see the timer hitting 2 hours here, so I'll try not to do an extra hour on just my recommendations. But
only a half an hour extra.
This coming up to this event got me to revisit some of Bong Joon-Ho's other films and to hit a couple of ones that I hadn't seen, and I'd heard really good things about Memories of Murder, his second feature from 2003. But I was not expecting it to be such a masterpiece, and similar to Parasite in terms of the tonal shifts happening within the storyline, sometimes even within the same scene, of just really dark humor going to serious drama, going to police procedural, going back to like just seemingly out of place silliness. But yeah, I can't say enough about Memories of Murder. It was a real gut punch. It was an awesome film. The score is amazing. The cinematography is amazing. There were several times during the film where I had to just pause it on an image and just sit back and just look at this still image and say, that's incredible looking. And a great early performance. I think it's the first time that Song Kang-ho worked with Bong, so that's the beginning of their collaboration as well. I had to rent it on Amazon. I don't think it's available on any streaming service right now for free, but it's worth the $4 for sure. And then another one that I was tipped off to by Criterion Channel's New Korean Cinema presentation that they've sort of been doing for the last month. They're highlighting a lot of the late 90s into the 2000s movement of these Korean filmmakers like Bong Joon-Ho, who grew up with the really restricted, censored Korean artistic lifestyle. They had to, buy bootleg VHS tapes of American films. They had to, trade DVDs back and forth. And these are guys like Park Chan-wook, who directed Old Boy and is an extremely successful director. And it's sort of a parallel to the 70s New Hollywood movement of Lucas and Coppola and Spielberg. But one of the films that this Criterion Channel presentation has is called The Quiet Family from 1998. It's directed by Kim Ji-woon. Also starring Song Kang-ho, because I think that Song Kang-ho is in every Korean film from the last 25 years, honestly. But similar to Parasite in that it's a mix of some family drama, dark comedy, a little bit of a crime mystery thriller, but basically this family purchases this ramshackle inn on the top of a mountain that seemingly no one ever climbs up, hoping to turn it into a popular destination point. And it's a huge failure. No one ever shows up until one day someone climbs up the mountain and they say, I want to stay in your inn. And in the middle of the night, they die unexpectedly. And the family says, well, we can't sully the reputation of our business by letting people know that someone was killed in our establishment. So we got to get rid of the body, of course. So we got to bury the body in the woods. Great. Seemingly overnight, more people start coming up the mountain. More people want to stay in their inn. And more people come to these weird ends inside the inn. And they have to keep getting rid of the bodies and getting rid of the bodies. And it's almost like kind of a dark comedy, gory Addams Family vibe. And just layers upon layers of situations keep happening where they have to cover something up and cover something else up and constantly evading the law. And it's very, very funny. It's a great family story, and it kind of gave me some of the same vibes as Parasite.
Just that photo reminds me of Clue for some reason, and I don't know if that's
it's kind of the Korean Clue. That's a good point. Yep.
It looks like it's got kind of a zany vibe to it.
Yep.
That's cool. I'm gonna add that one to the list. I've never heard of that one, and I know I'd heard of the Memory of Murder, and I haven't seen it yet. I watched Okja and The Host and was trying to chug through them, but I'm looking forward to watching that, and I'm glad to hear that it's got the Caleb seal of approval.
For sure.
It's as strong as Oprah's book club sticker.
Oh yeah, if not more significant.
Picture of your face.
Yeah. Virginia, what about you? Do you have a recommendation for what to watch next?
So I'm going to try to share my screen to see if you guys can see this. I don't know if it's going to work. So it might do it. And can you see that? Does that show up?
No, not
Maybe
seen
not.
it.
Never mind. In that case, I will just tell you guys about a film called Tokyo that I talked about at the very beginning. It was my first introduction into Bong Joon-Ho, but also if you are a fan of Michel Gondry, it's just a really cool movie. It's three separate films, so it's not like it's like one whole narrative, and you're not really strapping in for like, something that's gonna feel too long or not like digestible. So if you're looking for something that's just like cool and fun and kind of takes a romantic look in a lot of different ways at Japan, but through fully non-Japanese artists, I would definitely recommend it. It's Tokyo with an exclamation point. It came out in 2008. And then The Crown, season 4, you guys. Plowed through that. Like, came out on Sunday. It's Wednesday. I've watched all of it.
Nice.
Great acting in general. Cool set designs because they recreate a lot of stuff. They have like a few different Buckingham Palace sets, which are really cool. But similarly, it's interesting when you're doing something that has a semi-biographical feel. Obviously, they took a lot of creative license with this, but if you haven't seen the show before, they are taking a look at the British monarchy, starting with Queen Elizabeth II's basically her marriage to Prince Philip, and then it goes into like her coronation pretty quickly in 1952, I believe. Because now between this and the Great British Baking Show, I am, of course, a true British historian. But it's cool. I don't know. It's a weird thing to look at, especially we live in America. We famously, said, farts to like our British, former fellows. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but it blew my mind and made me feel like as Americans, we totally did this on purpose. Like an ex-girlfriend that was like, this ain't your favorite song. This is my favorite song. And I'm going to play it and I'm going to go to a concert and I'm going to do this. The theme to God Bless America is the same theme music to God Save the Queen. We didn't even change the theme. We didn't even change the composition to come up with our own thing, you guys. It's the same. And I only knew that because I was watching The Crown and they start playing. I was like, I know that song. And then it's God Save the Queen. And I was like, we are petty. We did it. We got our freedom. We threw a bunch of tea into the water. And then we decided, you know what, that's my favorite song. And it's going to be my anthem. And it just was so funny to me that I don't know if everybody just knew that. And it was very obvious. And people that are listening to this can fully laugh at me if you want. I don't care. But that was a hilarious surprise to me. So watch The Crown. Learn about the British monarchy. Did you guys know that before? And I'm just really stupid.
I did not know that.
Okay, good. Because there was a couple years ago where I really learned that narwhals were real because 100% for up until I was 25, I was like, narwhals and unicorns, they're the same thing. One just lives in the water. And then it turns out they're very real.
Oh, yeah.
And I cannot tell you how deep my depression was for a week after that because I felt like I did not have a firm grasp on reality as an adult.
Until you know what a narwhal is and that it's real.
Just the fact that I thought it was fake, guys. Truly
but
thought
it
was
could
a mythical creature. It could be, but it isn't. And most people know that
it doesn't seem like a practical animal to exist, but that's a different conversation.
But it does, and it's real. So similarly, if a lot of people knew that, good for you, but I didn't.
A good default setting is whatever you think isn't real is probably real, and whatever you think, you know what I mean? Just think the opposite is probably true. No matter what.
Wise words from Caleb.
In that case, I guess unicorns are real too. Yeah, it's really.
They can be real in our hearts, you know?
What about you, Sarah? Any good recommendations?
Yeah, well, I'm sure anyone who's seen Parasite has seen Coen Brother films. Yeah, I think Fargo is a good place to start there. But for something that many people probably haven't seen, I would have to go with Sorry to Bother You.
Nice.
For something, I was trying to think, what's a movie that is similar, I don't know, in like the surprise element, tonally.
It was one of the only ones that I thought of that I was like, it's a weird double feature with Parasite, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this was one that, I think I saw the trailer for it. And speaking of Michel Gondry, it made me think of that aesthetic of like almost a magical realism and probably a lot of practical effects in that. And I like a whimsical, semi-grounded in reality kind of film. And so I went into this thinking it was going to be that. And I was, I don't even know, like blown away in the best way possible. And it subverted my expectations in the best way possible. And then the ending, I think we'll have to do a cinema lab on this movie.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It also just getting into like the, social, cultural subtext and, the messages that are buried and very obvious in this film are fantastic. It's a wonderful film. So if you haven't seen Sorry to Bother You, definitely go check that out. That's
also,
my
Lakeith
recommendation.
Stanfield, who is the actor in that poster, he's in Get Out too. He's in a lot of things.
That's right.
He's so good. He's so
one of my
good.
favorite actors.
He's
right
also
now,
he
for
played
sure.
the boyfriend in that movie, that Netflix movie with Gina Rodriguez too, that made Lizzo popular. I can't remember the name of it now, but he was in that too. So he has a really wide range of like funny and then romantic comedy kind of lead, and then screaming up from the inside in his eyes, like in Get Out.
Okay, so aside from these films that you guys should be watching after you see Parasite, there's a little more homework that everyone needs to do to prep for our next events. So coming up next, taking a trip down memory lane, we're talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So this is going to be a Screen Club event, which Screen Club is what Virginia founded, and it's kind of the TV iteration of Cinema Lab. But they're practically the same thing. That's why we all collaborate together on this. But Screen Club, we are dissecting the TV series Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on December 7th at 6 o'clock. Same place. We're streaming on YouTube and Facebook and all that. But while you are in the midst of binge watching, make sure you also watch Home Alone, because that's going to be our next Cinema Lab event on December 17th. So
As if you'd ever go a single
yesterday,
December
though.
without watching Home Alone. Come on.
I know, but it's a reason to rewatch it. Okay. And I'm excited because Hayes is going to be joining us on that. And as we had talked about John Williams a little bit earlier in this chat, Hayes loves John Williams and has a lot of cool stuff to teach us all about his style of score. All right, you guys. It's been real. It's been fun. We covered a lot of good stuff. If anyone watching or listening wants to continue the conversation, just hop on Facebook or Instagram and let's chat it up. Wealthy Theater or Cinema Lab GR. If you have recommendations for what you want us to talk about in the future, let us know, whether it's a TV show or a movie. Always open to recommendations. Or if you want to join the chat, please do. As a reminder, programs like Screen Club and Cinema Lab are part of the Grand Rapids Community Media Center, and Wealthy Theater is a proud service of the Grand Rapids Community Media Center. So if you want to see more programs like this or help what we're doing right now, please support us. You can go to wealthytheater.org/donate. Similarly, you can go to grcmc.org/donate, or just check out GRCMC and see all the different things that we do. So we appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. And Caleb, Virginia, it's been real. Thank you guys so much for taking 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours out of your evening to talk about Parasite.
I didn't know I loved hanging out in my bathroom this much.
I did.
We secretly know. All right, guys. Well, until next time, it's been real. Thanks for tuning in.
Good night.